I'm becoming a bit more active on my YouTube channel. I'm not a late to market individual. I actually started this channel about 13, 14 years ago, and I've been hovering around 1,500 followers for a long time. And I'll admit it, there's been times I just really haven't posted content in long periods. Years ago, just a quick background, I had a most efficient running technique video that hit about 800,000 views. And then, of course, what I want to speak on quickly is I'm now an academic. I've been a university professor the last 17 years, I think, and I posted other academic content. And I did do a video on how to geomap zip codes into a free software called Google My Maps. And we do that a lot in our survey research. We'll ask respondents in a survey, what's your zip code? And then we can export that whole list of zip codes, import those into Google My Maps, and it creates this beautiful visual with little data points where all the survey respondents came from. So I did a video on that, and that I think is at 30 or 40,000 views. So there's been some content with traction out there, metaphorical traction. And but I'd like to come back, and I sure have remained interested in motocross racing all these years. By the way, I want to give out a real heartfelt shout out to an individual who just recently passed away. It's interesting, just within days of when Scott Burnworth had passed away of a heart attack, one in my opinion, one of the greatest Southeastern motocrossers from my early years when I wrote for Cycle News was Marvin McDaniel. Very talented racer at a regional level, top 10 rider in a national. And Marvin and his family were very, very kind to me when I first got to Atlanta and wrote for Cycle News. So I wanted to mention Marvin today. A bit more, if you haven't watched my video yet on really how I, in my opinion, might approximate what the value of the new TV package for Supercross and Motocross might be, I'd recommend you watch that. What I find interesting, and again, back to my university work, one of the things we do teaching, research, and service. Those are the big three responsibilities as a university professor. And as part of research, we do creative activity. And that's why I think I'm going to try to bring more YouTube comment forward, maybe more or less framed from my academic responsibility. Okay, so a couple things, and this works for everything, especially what we hear from all the YouTube creators now about the sport. What is epistemology? Okay, epistemology is really, in simplest terms, our universe of knowledge. Okay, in everything we know, what do we know? But most importantly is, why do we know that? Why do we know that? So in my mind, when I hear things on the YouTube, and I really enjoy the latest, new YouTube journalists, we call them, and there's reports that the Supercross and motocross promoters may be getting a $100 to $200 million rights deal for television. I question, what do I know and why do I know that? Well, again, I mentioned in the prior video, if you want to watch that, I was at the AMA. I came through journalism and Cycle News. I covered the motocross program, Supercross Motocross, for 3 years. Then I went on to 5 years with the Wrangler brand. I was highly involved with Wrangler in Supercross and motocross when we did the Wrangler Super Series in 1983, which David Bailey won that championship. So I've got this long background. And then I was at the AMA from probably around 92 through 96 as a staffer. I was hired as VP of marketing and was also director of professional competition. So in that, I did a lot of work with the TV agreements at that time. Okay. Today, I'd like to say, why do we know what we know? Well, again, if you go back for me, you start saying, well, I think, and again, go through my numbers, and it's in my opinion, right? I'm guessing as an outsider, or let's say extrapolating as an outsider, I think it may be worth about tops $1 million an event for TV rights and ancillary sponsorships in the TV package. And you can see how I figure that times approximately 28 events. Let's say it's 28 million. Now, Peacock isn't in the business of giving all the money away, right? They're in business. They have to make money. So they're surely not going to hand over everything that they acquire or aggregate in TV revenues and in ancillary sponsorships and just give that to the promoters. Okay, so why do I know what I know? Well, I start looking around a little bit. And again, these are all private negotiated situations. But if you look at what might be the NFL, which was negotiated over many, many years of, union-oriented contract labor disputes, a sport might get 50% of revenues, might get 50. Okay, so follow with me here and see what you think. If you take 28 million, and that's my best approximation, and there's 28 million, does Peacock, the TV provider, do they provide 14 million back to the promoting groups? Okay, that could be possible, right? But there's costs. Think of production costs, the trucks, the labor, the transportation, right? And then also on the TV side, there's talent. You have to pay all these, interesting individuals that are on air and talk to us every show, right? There's a lot of costs that go into it. So if the promoting group gets 14 million, then you might start deciding, well, if that's on their side, and again, they have to profit too, right? We know that they have to make some money. If we're projecting that forward, then what amount might be going back to riders and teams? One of the hardest things with the AMA, and I was involved with putting Mazda into the motocross program back in those days. I thought that was a great series sponsorship. AMA was always trying to recreate the points fund. Remember, money that went directly to riders based on their final championship standings, right? That was always the issue. And then many times you'd find out sponsors that say, well, what value do I really get for that? What value do I get? And then now today, here we are decades later, talking about what should the riders and teams get out of the sport, right? Of all the revenues generated, what should they be getting? Should they be a net negative and only calling it advertising value, or should they be sharing more in the actual profits created through the sport? Okay, so again, you can build conjecture around this, but I'm just trying to take you from what someone says is $200 million to the promoters and really bring that down to what might be 14 million and what's their profit, et cetera. So you can build through that as you want, but all I'm saying is epistemology in this would be, what do I know? And then why would I think that? So I sort of have to self-examine and try to understand, what do I think is truth, right? And the other point in creative activity I'd suggest I'd apply to this is explication. We explicate, and that's really just looking at everything we can find and trying to understand in our best sense, what is out there as facts. Like I just stated, I don't know what is traditional historically on what should go back to race teams and racers based on, the rights package or whatever's coming into the organization. But, again, this NFL model might be 50%. So it's somewhere to start, but I'm trying to bring in additional information. And all I suggest, as we all go through this, just use your own sense and test these ideas. Don't just accept them. Everything that's reported now as we call, might be news or YouTube or however we get it. Try to test it on your own behalf, okay? So that would be the explication of the item. One last thing, and I'll follow up with this and then close. Back at the AMA, I thought some of you might be interested in how television used to work and maybe how it works today and what has all happened through the history of television and getting the sport on TV. Now, going way back to the mid-90s, maybe the early 90s, I remember the AMA, and I'm being honest here, I can't remember the number, but even converted to what would be $20, $25, it wasn't a huge amount of money, right? It's nothing like everybody might be professing is happening today, okay? But there was a time with ESPN, I believe, when the AMA was getting some rights fee. So basically they said, here, we're paying you this amount, we'll take it, we'll put it on TV. So, that was the best case scenario. Right. And if the promoters today are getting rights fees again, I commend them, because that is not easy and it's not always the way it works for what we might argue are second tier sports. Okay. So in that day, okay, here's the progression. We had a little bit of rights money, and then the network would pay all the production costs, put it on TV, etc. As the years went by, this is the next transition. They said, okay, no more rights money, but guess what? We'll let you keep a few commercial spots. Okay, it's up to you. You can sell them, use them in sponsorships. As a matter of fact, just recently in podcasts, I heard, true or not, I do not know, I'm not any longer involved, that the motocross promoters must have held some spots because there was an issue of putting, a sponsor for an event was negotiating some spots in the telecast. Okay, so let's just say that. So I remember that day where, however many spots are in an hour, no more rights fee money, but the networks would say you can hang on to a few TV spots. Now, if you're not in the spot sales business, you're not a media, buyer seller type person. It's really hard to go out there to people and say, hey, do you want to buy commercials? Because people in that industry are very savvy. They know the lowest dollar they can get it for. They're tough negotiators. Okay, it's tough. So the other model is, if you can bring in a sponsor, let's say you have a series sponsor, and maybe you say, okay, we'll give you one commercial spot in every of the shows because you're holding a few. Okay, so again, then it's up to you, but I'm just making a point here that it's not always easy to convert those spots to sale. Okay, so you get to that point. Well, then one day goes by further, and then they might say, well, we're not giving you anything. Frankly, you're lucky to be on TV. We're spending a lot. We have to invest, we have to take the risk. You're not getting anything, but we'll put you on. Okay, so now you don't have any rights fee money. You don't have any held back spots, commercial spots. And now they're just saying, okay, you'll get on TV, but you're not getting anything from us. We're holding back all the assets and revenue. Okay. And then finally, the next phase is, guess what? If you want to be on our network, you have to come up and pay the production costs. Okay, so can you see all the shift to where rights fees and money are coming into an organization like the AMA, and then after the phases, now they're responsible to come up with money and pay the network to put it on, because all of a sudden you're saying, man, it's really hard to get TV. It's really hard. And there was a time, and right now to have that Peacock package, that is just amazing that is on there, because there were times it was very hard. And someone can help me understand more of the facts, because I wasn't connected to the sport real heavily for several years prior, when I believe the motocross promoters were putting together their own type of TV package, weren't they? And I think they were trying to produce it, and that cost money, right? They're taking risks with some TV partner, and I think they were trying to sell subscriptions. So again, they're taking risk and investing money, trying to help people pay some subscription fees for, break even, or maybe you make a little money, but the risk is back on the promoter at that point. And that's where I remember it at the end of my tenure working with the AMA is, having to come up with funds to even try to get on TV, and then trying to shop out to other networks and see who would do what. But believe me, it gets to a point where it was not an easy thing at the sport level we were at to get any kind of preferential treatment to be on television. Okay, so here we are today. I mean, I'm not part of it. I don't claim to be, but I'm just suggesting, if you look at what the promoters do and think about the whole path of where this has gone, I'm not taking sides here. I think there's a lot of clickbait out there right now, sort of anti-promoter, anti-supercross promoter, anti-outdoor promoter, leaning more toward team rights, rider rights. That could be true, but all I'm saying is explication, epistemology. What do you know? What is the body of knowledge? And then what can we do to better understand what this situation really is between these organizations back to the teams and riders? Okay. I'm not suggesting or purporting there shouldn't be change, but I would like to, I guess, lend to the conversation and just be someone who says, let's just, have a reasoned voice in the middle and try to fully understand when things are stated as fact. Okay, what is truth? I think what is truth is an important part of this process. That's it. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.